La dichiarazione di guerra è già stata consegnata agli ambasciatori.
Mussolini says, "We shall conquer." 3 years later, in May 1943, what remains of the Italian army in Africa surrenders at Cap Bon in Tunisia. This is the end of the great fascist dream. There isn't going to be another Roman Empire. And from Alexandria to Tangiers, the Mediterranean coastline is in the hands of the Allies. The landing in Sicily is the greatest amphibious operation ever attempted. Coming from all the North African ports, hundreds of boats sail before a stormy wind towards the Sicilian beaches. At dawn, on July the 10th, 1943, two armies set foot on the shores of southern Sicily. In the east, Montgomery's 8th Army. In the west, the American 7th Army under General George Patton, who, with his boots, his tourist camera, and his cowboy colt, immediately becomes the star of the campaign. In spite of a certain amount of confusion due to inexperience, the landing is a complete success. The Italian coastal divisions don't put up much of a fight. After all, as the Allies' propaganda leaflets say, why die for Hitler? Montgomery, the desert conqueror, doesn't hide his satisfaction. The Allied soldiers find amongst the fascist background fanatical propaganda in favor of Mussolini, Il Duce. But people are tired of war and ready to give the conquerors a triumphant welcome. Americans of Sicilian origin leave pockets full of addresses in the villages looking for cousins. Above all, there's the arrival of the American uncle, handsome, rich, generous, and well-disposed to solace the misery of little people. Some partisans are brought out from the shadows. People murmur that they also belong to the mafia. Everything has turned against fascism. The party officers struggle terrified in the purifying stream of democracy. Italian officials, who had found it easy to please the Germans, believed that they would have no difficulty in accommodating the new masters. The start of the invasion of Europe has been disconcertingly easy. The Italians, no longer enemies, are not yet trusted allies. But the Germans soon put a stop to this military parade. From the north of Italy, flying low over the water to escape the attention of the Allies, the heavy Junkers 52 of the Luftwaffe drop a division of paratroops and launch an immediate counterattack. Anxiously watching this sudden hardening of the situation, demands reinforcements urgently. From Algeria, Eisenhower sends him airborne troops. But when the planes arrive above the bridgehead, the Allied anti-aircraft forces, not recognizing them, open fire. the planes disperse and hundreds of the paratroopers are killed, shot or drowned. The Allies, who have air supremacy, now have to conquer a Sicily they believed was theirs for the taking. The offensive continues. In the east, Montgomery, confident of his experience of the 8th Army, which he's led since Egypt, intends to be the real victor. But he loses valuable time at Catania, at the foot of Mount Etna. Between the two armies, British and American, a real race develops to take Messina, at the northern tip of the island. The Germans, too few in number, feel the game is lost. But profiting from the splitting up maneuver of the Allies, they organize a Sicilian Dunkirk, and thanks to this, succeed in escaping to the Italian mainland with most of their equipment. When the American planes arrive over Messina, they are too late. The bird has flown. But for Patton, it's still a victory. He's sure to smoke out later the Germans who've escaped him now. Patton is first into Messina, where he welcomes the 8th Army of his rival Montgomery, as well as his own chief Eisenhower. A stupid incident mars his career for a time. In a field hospital, Patton slaps the face of a soldier affected by nervous depression. Eisenhower, on Roosevelt's orders, signifies the president's displeasure at this shameful act. Opposite the narrow channel, Ike and Monty, as the soldiers call them, are studying the Italian coast. It has taken 5 weeks to conquer Sicily, which offered little resistance. What has the Battle of Italy got in store for the Allies? The defeat of Sicily has shaken Mussolini's prestige. Il Duce calls a meeting of the Fascist Grand Council for July the 24th, 1943. It's agreed on a vote that the king will be restored as commander-in-chief in place of Mussolini. The next day, Mussolini goes to confide his difficulties to the king, Victor Emmanuel III. It's a trap. As he leaves the royal palace, Mussolini is arrested on the king's orders. He is taken away in an ambulance. As soon as the news gets out, the crowds rush into the streets and knock over the emblems left by 21 years of the fascist regime. The successor to Il Duce, whose appointment is kept secret for several days, is Marshal Pietro Badoglio, a former monarchist, who declares publicly, "The war goes on," but secretly sends his envoys immediately to ask for an armistice with the Allies. On hearing the announcement of Mussolini's downfall, and realizing that since Italy has ceased to be an ally, she has become willy-nilly an occupied country, Hitler reacts as expected. The Wehrmacht marches in long columns down through the Brenner Pass. Outside Rome, the Italian army attempts resistance. But what can it do against the paratroopers and the panzers of the German war machine? The post of Commander-in-Chief of the German troops in Italy is entrusted to Marshal Kesselring, an ex-pilot who went to school with Rommel. For the German divisions coming out of Russia, Italy seems by comparison a holiday resort. Hitler doesn't forget his friend Mussolini and orders an SS commando and some paratroopers to rescue him. Their leader is a scarred giant, Colonel Otto Scorzeni. Mussolini is being detained in a mountain palace on the Gran Sasso in the Abruzzi. It's there that Scorzeni finds him on September the 12th, 1943. With his commando unit, he lands in a glider on the mountain summit. The first words of Il Duce to Scorzeni: "It's high time. I was going to commit suicide." He's anxious now to leave. A small plane manages to land, takes Mussolini and Scorzeni aboard, slides towards the precipice, and succeeds in taking off again. Several hours later, Hitler welcomes the fallen Duce to his General Field Headquarters in East Prussia. Where he finds his son, Vittorio. Mussolini is feted and comforted. No question of suicide or exile. He must leave at once for Italy to restore fascism. And soon, Mussolini departs to meet his fate. At Milan, he finds again the enthusiastic crowds of before the war. Those who betrayed him will be executed, and this includes his son-in-law, Count Ciano. But Il Duce is only a shadow of his former self, watched over, if not actually guarded, day and night by officers of the SS, the officers who at the end of the war would abandon him to the partisans. After Sicily, the Allies envisaged an immediate landing to the north of Rome. However, the Supreme Command adopts a more prudent plan: to land in the south on September the 8th, the day of the Italian armistice. The British at Taranto, the Americans at Salerno. But at Salerno, nothing goes according to plan. The Germans are everywhere, standing fast on the beaches of Salerno, entrenched in the hills. They open fire on the Americans on sight. The new commander of the American Army, General Mark Clark, has very bad memories of this first invasion of Europe.
Mr. Churchill, he referred to the Mediterranean as the soft underbelly of Europe. And it became my job to slit that soft underbelly later and I found instead it was a rather tough old gut.
The Allied fleet assembles off the coast to back up the infantry. On land, there is total confusion. Even re-embarkation is suggested. In 10 days, there are thousands of wounded. Finally, the attackers succeed in breaking through, and Clark moves inland to rendezvous with Montgomery's British troops coming from the south of Calabria to break the German vice. On October the 1st, 1943, the Allies enter Naples, in the midst of ruins, refugees, and a population which at the same time is both terrified and relieved. Naples, for the American soldiers from across the seas, has the reputation of a tourist paradise. It is Pompeii and Vesuvius. But the volcano becomes active, and the eruption adds to the miseries of war. In the city, the Germans have planted time bombs, which injure Allied soldiers and Italian civilians alike. Naples is a shambles, and the people try to survive in any way possible. For General Clark, Naples is the greatest port in southern Italy, to which reinforcements can be sent. He is anxious now to open the road to Rome. Now it's autumn, wet and cold. On the Adriatic coast, Montgomery splashes around like his army. One is a long way from the holiday brochures on the banks of the Volturno in flood. During this rainy autumn, the Allies have at great cost reached the river Volturno, while the Germans have established a line of defense along the rivers Rapido and Garigliano, the Gustav line. Solidly supported against a barrier of mountains in the middle of the valley, like a sentinel guarding the road to Rome, is Monte Cassino. The road leading from Naples to Rome, the old Roman Casalina way, passes through the natural fortress of Monte Cassino, the site of a monastery founded by St. Benedict. At the foot of the cliff, like an advance post, is the little town of Cassino. The Gustav line passes through here. Kesselring intends to make it the Verdun of Italy. This mountainous barrier of over 150 kilometers slices right across the Italian boot. For 6 months it becomes a German rampart. On Monte Cassino and in Cassino village, the German 1st Parachute Division is entrenched. Everywhere, on the slopes, in the ravines, on the heights, the Alpine Corps and armoured troops are dug in. The Americans prepare an advance led by tanks and trucks, a sort of lightning attack. In the narrow valleys on the broken-up roads of the Apennines, their armoured troops, conspicuous in the starlight, are going to suffer, as the GIs say, blood and guts. They will be easy prey for the German 88mm guns concealed in the peaks. The Allied armies are made up of a strange mixture of troops from all sorts of backgrounds and 17 countries: Indians, Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, South Africans, and Maoris from the Pacific. There are even Japanese, recruited from those living in America before Pearl Harbor. They have been given the choice of internment or Italy. They fight well as the Nisei Division. Badoglio's Italians have reconstituted a mountain division. Brazil has sent a contingent. The Polish General Anders commands a corps integrated into the British 8th Army. His men, prisoners of the Russians in 1939, liberated in 1942, have made a tour of the Mediterranean to come and fight at Cassino. It will soon be the turn of the French. Algiers, in the spring of 1943, is not only the principal Allied strategic base in the Mediterranean, but the capital of wartime France. In May, General de Gaulle's army, welcomed by General Giraud, marks the reunification of the French forces in the struggle against Germany. The goal from now on is to give the French army fighting equipment and to find them a place on the battlefield.
Commanders, soldiers, marine, airmen, officers, French colonists from North Africa, rise, help our allies, join them without reservation. France at war needs you. All those who have the courage to start again, despite treason and the enemy, are already approved, welcomed, and acclaimed by all French combatants.
Those who had escaped from occupied France, thousands of young volunteers, landed in Algeria. They had already escaped from the Germans and had to endure Spanish prisons. In exchange for the freedom of these French prisoners, the Spanish demand a ransom for each in the form of phosphates, minerals, and even gold. On all sides, in Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco, Muslims and Europeans come forward to enlist. The first priority is to procure modern arms. Giraud and de Gaulle have obtained from the Allies sufficient modern equipment for their growing forces, and the Americans are the principal suppliers. Astonished, the French soldiers, who had fought in Tunisia with miserable material, discover the wealth of the American arsenal. The fleet is rearmed, the Air Force brought up to date. The American advance towards the Gustav Line soon strikes the advanced German defenses. The 36th Texan Division volunteers for the difficult mission of taking the little village of San Pietro in Fine. Gradually, the combat takes on the dimensions of a great battle, longer and longer, bloodier and bloodier. The Texas representatives protest violently to the American Congress about the sacrifice of the 36th Division. Finally, San Pietro is conquered. Several prisoners are taken, and the dazed, unhappy civilians find freedom again. During the fighting, the survivors have installed themselves in the abandoned ruins of the town. By the end of the year, the French Expeditionary Force is actively involved in the war. To the old soldiers, the atmosphere is reminiscent of 1914-80, with the agonizing proximity of the enemy, who from the heights watches everything that happens. On January the 3rd, 1944, Juin gets his power of independent command from the Allies. The 3rd Algerian Infantry Division of General Monsalbert reaches Aqua Fondata, the last ridge before the Gustave line. Monsalbert installs his artillery there. Now they must climb down into the valley opposite the well-entrenched enemy by a dizzy road which has earned the nickname of Death Road. At the end of Death Road, French advance posts are set up, overlooked on all sides by the Germans. The village of Santa Elia is held by only a few dozen marksmen and Algerian troops. The Allies are at last in contact with the Gustave line. It's winter. The peaks are snow-capped, and on each one of them the Germans are watching, ready to return fire from Monte Carlo, an enormous frozen pyramid, as far as Monte Cassino, which bars the road to Rome. After the checks to their attacks on the Cassino front, the Allies decide to take the Gustave line from the rear and to land here, the Americans at Nettuno and the British at Anzio. On the first day of the operation, January the 22nd, 1944, ahead of the Allies there's nothing, and the road to Rome seems open. But the American, General Lucas, who is in command, holds back his troops, and this excessive caution provokes a drama. The Germans have hastily concentrated their artillery on blocking the Apennine Way which leads to Rome. An enormous gun on the railway undertakes a systematic pounding of the bridgehead. Kesselring is the complete opposite to his adversary Lucas. While the American is slow to react, the German replies in crushing fashion. To demoralize the Allies from Anzio, he invents the slogan, "Bridgehead, Deadhead." He launches counterattack after counterattack. He captures a battalion of American Rangers who are about to march to Rome to impress the Italians. General Lucas is relieved of his command, but from now on, the Allies are on the defensive. The Anzio operation, which was going to be such a brilliant success, becomes defeat. There, the Allies are overwhelmed by the German artillery. There are few survivors. Anzio is a flop. The Americans launch a new attack on the Cassino front. The French Expeditionary Force, installed on the right in the Venafro-Acapundata-St. Helier sector, is entrusted with a diversionary maneuver in the direction of Mount Belvedere. Down in the valley, the Americans themselves are going to attempt to cross the river, which separates them from Monte Cassino, the Rapido. It's again the 36th Texan Division who suffered so much at San Pietro, who are charged with forcing a way through. Utter failure. The 36th Texans stagger back exhausted to their starting point, having lost 1,600 men. Opposite Monte Cassino, the Americans, worn down by the Battle of the River Rapido, are relieved at the beginning of February by a British force commanded by the New Zealander General Freyberg. Freyberg, who made his name in the desert battles, immediately launches his assault troops, mostly Gurkhas of the 4th Indian Division, in the direction of Cassino and the monastery. The infantry advances a little way, but is soon stopped by the German artillery, and Freyberg recalls his depleted regiments. Surrounded by smoke, like a volcano, Monte Cassino dominates the battlefield. It obsesses everyone, soldiers and generals alike. The Allied soldiers are beginning to think that Monte Cassino is impregnable. They believe the Germans are using the monastery as a fortress, and in the British and American ranks, a hatred of the monastery is developing. But at this time, the monument is still intact, and the only living quarters are those of the monks and refugees. The German general von Senger und Etterlin even tries to remove its most precious treasures to the safety of Rome. He has forbidden his soldiers to approach nearer than 300 meters. But the British generals aren't convinced and think it's a trick. Each day they photograph the monastery from Piper Cub observation planes. General Freyberg then declares that he will stop attacking so that the monument will not be destroyed. In Allied headquarters, the matter goes up to Field Marshal Alexander. Discussion is lively. General Clark, for his part, is against bombardment.
I was surprised, for I did not think that it was the thing to do to destroy such an ancient work, and I would be glad to do it if the enemy was using it, but our intelligence revealed that the enemy was not using the abbey. And then, too, I knew from experience that when you destroy a great edifice, the rubble makes a better defensive work than before.
General Clark, did you point that out to General Freiberg?
Oh, yes, I did, and we discussed it. I appreciated his point of view, and I discussed it at length. I discussed it with General Alexander, who got into the picture because General Freiberg asked him to intervene. And so finally, General Alexander asked me to bomb the abbey. And I said, I will do it if you give me orders to do so, which he did.
In the hope of saving the 1,000 Italian refugees who had claimed asylum from the Benedictines before the bombing began, leaflets are fired in special shells. On February the 15th, at dawn, the bombardment begins with artillery fire. Then, hundreds of planes fly from Sicily and Naples towards Monte Cassino. In 3 hours, St. Benedict's Monastery is destroyed, leaving the German defences still intact. The ruined monastery is taken over by the Germans and makes a fairly effective strongpoint. The 1st Paratroop Division entrenches itself there in the ruins of the monastery. These German paratroops have fought at Rotterdam, in Crete, and in Sicily. But it's at Cassino they earn their name, the Green Devils. The day after the bombardment, General Freiberg launches a new frontal attack. In theory, now that the monastery is destroyed, nothing more can stop him advancing. But once again there is failure. Indians, Maoris and New Zealanders try in vain to scale the peaks of Monte Cassino. At the end of 3 hours, Field Marshal Alexander gives the order to stop the assault. Since they can't take the mountain, an attack is mounted in the valley, on the town of Cassino, which on March the 15th is wiped off the map by a terrible bombardment of 775 planes and 750 guns. Immediately, the New Zealanders, reinforced by Canadian and British tanks, advance. Battle is joined in the ruins, which are held by only 150 German paratroopers. British infantry advances alone under the barrage of mortars. The tanks, stopped by the mass of ruins, are unable to follow. At the end of 4 days, it's clear the New Zealand Corps, in spite of their courage, has failed. All that remains now is to call a truce, to allow each side to collect their wounded. Field Marshal Alexander considers it may be better to stop operations, but his French and Polish allies are determined to try their own strength. The French General Juin makes an outflanking attack on the left, while the Polish Corps of General Anders make a final frontal assault on the mountain strongpoint. The combination proves too much for the Germans. The Poles capture the monastery and take the ruins of the abbey on May the 12th, breaking the 5 months deadlock. A symbolic triumph. The Germans are now in full retreat, harassed by the Allied Air Force, who have undisputed mastery of the skies. Along a road littered with German dead and debris, the tanks, trucks, mules and infantrymen push forward in the warm spring sunshine to take Rome. High in the mountains, the 22,000 Moroccan scouts of General Guillaume sweep from ridge to ridge. The American soldiers are eager to rescue their comrades, taken prisoner in January when caught in the Anzio trap. Then, a fighting advance on Rome. General Clark, in his jeep, overtakes the leading tanks. Rome, the eternal city, is in his grasp. The Germans evacuate in haste to the north, and their departure is secretly filmed by an Italian cameraman. In the evening of June the 4th, 1944, the first American patrols penetrate Rome. The French army reaches Tivoli in the suburbs. The next day, Clark and Juin meet up, and they inspect the city together. A soldier of the French Pacific Battalion runs up the flag of the Farnese Palace, the headquarters of the French ambassador. On June the 6th, the French troops march into Rome, and the British hold a parade. The Germans continue to retreat towards the north, towards Siena and Florence. But they're still disciplined troops and still dangerous, leaving behind them mines and traps, blocking roads, blowing up bridges. In the mountains, the Italian partisans harass the retreating German column. The Germans react ruthlessly, and all those partisans captured are summarily executed.
We had planned in Italy, as a result of a visit from Marshal Tito and from all the British, the King of England and Churchill, that we would go across the Adriatic, go through the Ljubljana Gap, and head towards Vienna and Budapest before the Russians. That was briefly the plan that we hoped we might execute. But when I met President Roosevelt in Sicily, when he came to see me from Tehran, he told me of a plan that had developed that Stalin was greatly interested in for this southern France landing.
In the event, policy changes abruptly. The Allies do not enter the Balkans and switch their main effort to the invasion of France and Western Europe. The French army in Italy takes Siena undamaged amid scenes of medieval triumph, and the Italian campaign is virtually ended. However, it is the memories of the epic battles at Cassino, where the Allies and the Germans leave 50,000 dead, that will be remembered as the turning point in the battle for Italy.
The battle you have just seen was one of the decisive battles of the Second World War, a war that affected the destinies of men and nations the world over. The film you have just witnessed was discovered in film libraries all over the world and painstakingly edited to show you the incredible impact these individual battles had on the outcome of this most devastating of wars. The world, thanks to these films, will never forget the tremendous effort put forth by all people included in the big battles.